Hello and welcome to The Print. I am Somi Sukanya Datta, and today we have with us Dr. Netravati M., professor at the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences or NIMHANS, Bengaluru, to discuss issues around multiple sclerosis, as May happens to be the MS Awareness Month. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Netravati. Please tell us about multiple sclerosis, what are its symptoms, and how big is the challenge in India?
Hi everyone, a very good day. So, multiple sclerosis is basically a immunological disorder. So, when I mean immunological disorder, it basically implies that we actually have an immune system which protects us whenever we have some infection, which could be either from some bacteria or viruses. But here, in people with multiple sclerosis, they have a dysregulated immune system because of which they develop the symptoms. So now I'm coming to the symptoms of MS. So it depends on which nerve is affected in the body. If the eyes are affected, they'll have visual blurring, they may not be able to see, or they may have double vision where they see every object as two and sometimes either displaced horizontally or vertically. Sometimes they also have difficulty in swallowing, speech, having little bit of comprehension problem, mild memory disturbances, behavioral changes could be there in terms of irritation, frequent anger outbursts, or emotional upheavals. If it affects the upper limb and the lower limb, they may also have weakness, the weakness in terms of gripping any objects or trying to walk or some imbalance while walking. And when the lower part of the brain or the spinal cord is affected, they may also have difficulty in controlling their bowel and bladder. So these are the various symptoms. So these symptoms can also be in many other disorders. So what basically I want to say is the symptoms are usually which will start suddenly in onset, and when it starts it causes a lot of difficulties in their activities of daily living, and they need to consult a neurologist. So that these symptoms can also be there in many other neurological disorders. So the doctor will be able to examine and delineate whether this is multiple sclerosis or not. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So I asked you about, how many people in India actually get affected by it. Is this a problem which concerns or affects a large number of population? What exactly happens in
So
India?
we actually don't have the prevalence as to what is the affection in India. So we are trying to establish a registry. We have established a registry with the help of ICMR in the last 3 years, and we are trying to get this data. And I think maybe in the next 6 months or so, we may get the Indian data. But otherwise, correlating with what is there already from the Western literature and few of the studies which have been done in India, it is around 5 per lakh. So this is the
Yeah.
prevalence which is there in India, and it is not that it is very common. It is likely a rare disorder, but immune mediated disorder, this is one of the most common.
Okay. Based on ethnicities, we see that many diseases manifest themselves in different forms in Western countries as compared to India. When it comes to multiple sclerosis, is the same trend also seen here based on ethnicity? Are there any differences between how multiple sclerosis affects Indians as compared to the people in the West?
I would like to emphasize one thing here. Initially, when MS was being diagnosed in India, they thought that MS was slightly different from the Western population. Because what is happening is MS is one type of demyelinating disorder, but there are also other demyelinating disorders where it is called as NMO and MOG spectrum disorders. These are slightly common in India compared to multiple sclerosis, but when it started, we were not aware as to how to diagnose or differentiate between these three. So 15, 20 years back, or even 10 years back, it was thought that MS is not very common in India because of the differences which are there. But now, with better diagnostics, we know that MS is almost as much as the same as in Western population. There are not much of differences. There are a lot of ethnic distribution or differences in the Western literature, but we do not see that in India. We see that almost it doesn't affect any of the particular ethnicity, but there is definitely a difference between how it affects the urban or the rural population. It has been seen that it is slightly more in urban societies, slightly affecting more affluent population, but this is just an observation which is there, which has been replicated in multiple studies. And as I said, this we will have a more robust data once we have the registry.
Okay. Um, since you said that the type of and the distribution of MS is same in India as compared to the West, but over the years, over the decades in India itself, are we seeing any changes in disease landscape, in symptoms, for instance, the way it affects men, women? Does it have anything to do with gender? The symptoms are changing or they remain the same? What has been your experience or what you know of the disease?
Okay, multiple sclerosis basically it has a gender predilection. It affects more women. So if you take 10 women or 10 per population, it will be 8 women will be affected and 2 men will be affected. But the severity of the disease is slightly more in men. That means male population have slightly severe disease compared to a female. But
Okay.
again, the commonality is more in female. And the other thing, the other differences would be about, as I said, about the urban and the rural population, which is there. You asked something else also, right? I think
Yes,
I
yes, yes.
missed. What was the other question you asked me apart
So
from the
I basically
differences?
wanted to understand in India itself, are we seeing any changes in the
Changing
way
landscape. Yeah,
in,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
disease has
So, what happened was initially we used to think that MS is just what you see. That is, we call it as a visible symptoms. Visible symptoms means a person is not able to see, a person is not able to walk, a person is not able to balance his body. So that even a patient will be able to see as well as somebody else also will be able to see. This is called as visible symptoms. So initially MS was thought of only the visible symptoms, but we know now that there are a lot of invisible symptoms. What we mean by invisible symptom is the patient feels that he has a lot of fatigue, but it cannot be, it is a very subjective phenomenon. It may not be seen or it cannot be properly objectively assessed by any physician or a doctor. We'll have to rely on the patients. So there are a lot of such invisible symptoms where the patients feel lot of symptoms. One of them is the fatigue, the other is lot of mood disturbances, few of them are cognitive disturbances and also slightly behavioral changes. But if you take among all this, the cognition, the behavior, yes, if we put some scales, we'll still be able to assess. But fatigue is one thing which we will not be able to assess. We'll have to rely on the patients. So this is the landscape that initially where we were thinking that it was just of motor symptoms, now we know MS is a mixture of both visible and invisible symptoms. And these invisible symptoms are also as deadly or as disabling as the motor symptoms. And we need to see that we try to control both of this so that a patient's quality of life is much better.
okay. So how is the disease managed? Is it based on the symptoms that one has? Also, how has its treatment evolved over the years? I believe there are many newer, safer, and more technologically advanced drugs which are now available to treat this disease. So, have they made the lives of patients, because quality of life in such patients is very much compromised? Has it improved the way these patients live their lives, carry out their day-to-day tasks?
Yes, I would very much agree that the science has definitely revolutionized and so much of research has been carried out in multiple sclerosis. When I was a student, at least 20 years back, we had very few medications which were there for multiple sclerosis. It was basically about giving some steroids or some medications and trying to control the symptoms. But we did not have much of medications where we could prevent. In MS, what happens is it is not that you get the illness and then it will remain continuously. Initially, it has something called as a relapsing remitting course. That means it comes and goes. So what used to happen only when the symptoms would come initially, we would just start them with some medications, which we call it as corticosteroids. So that was the only available treatment many years back. But now we know how to prevent the occurrence of those relapses. We know how to prevent the progression of multiple sclerosis. And we also know there is a degenerative phase which happens in MS, which can be preventing by giving the appropriate medications. So now if you actually look, there's a basket of medications which are available, coming from very low cost to high cost, and depending on their financial constraints or not, you can tailor it, and depending on how much severe it is, we can tailor and give the best medications to them. And these medications are now, especially, we one thing we need to remember in multiple sclerosis is catch early, hit it hard. What do I mean by these two is catch early means the moment you diagnose MS, you need to start them on medications. There is no reason to procrastinate. There is no reason to delay. It is not that okay, the person had just a few symptoms. Let me give the treatment after a few years when it becomes disabling. No, never. Start it very early, the moment the diagnosis is made, and hit it hard. What do I mean by hit it hard? Is give the best medication which is there, because now a lot of medications are very good. So once you start all this, they will be able to lead a better life. They will be able to have a better quality of life.
Yeah. Let's hope that people who need these medications reach out to doctors pretty soon in their diagnosis and start their treatment and improve their quality of lives. So, with that, we wrap up this conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Netravati, for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.